Marcus Del Rey was a man who had already served more than a decade behind bars. Inside the Texas Department of Criminal Justice system, time doesn't move like it does outside. Everything is routine, controlled, stripped of choice. Inmates like Marcus are watched, counted, and written up for even the smallest infraction. But Marcus didn't cause trouble. He followed every rule. Over the years, he'd worked his way down from medium custody to trustee status, a rare privilege. He handled staff laundry, mopped admin offices, and even served meals to correctional officers. It was quiet work, but it gave him access. And more than that, it gave him hope. Hope came in the form of a woman named Alana Brooks, a prison ministry volunteer who became his weekly visitor, then his fiancée. But one Sunday morning, during a standard Class II visitation at the Polunsky unit, Marcus stepped into the visitation room and froze. Alana wasn't sitting at their usual table. She was on her knees behind the vending machine, just barely tucked into a known camera blind spot, and standing beside her was the guard who supervised that entire wing, his utility belt on the floor, his arms crossed, watching the doorway. In Texas prisons, there are strict rules. Every visit is logged. Every movement is tracked. But in that moment, none of those systems seemed to matter. The silence in that room hit Marcus harder than any cell door ever had. 48 hours later, 2 people were dead, and Marcus Del Rey was on suicide watch. In Texas prisons, every movement is logged, every visit is scheduled, every minute accounted for. So how did a prisoner, already on a low-risk classification, witness something so graphic, so personal, that it shattered every ounce of control he'd worked to build? How did a man who was just months away from freedom end up at the center of a double-death investigation? Was this just about betrayal? Or was something bigger at play, something deeper than a broken relationship, maybe something that had been going on long before Marcus even knew it? And how does a woman who swore to wait for him, who passed background checks to enter a secure facility, end up tangled in a secret exchange that could cost lives? What was really going on behind the doors of that visitation room? Because less than 48 hours after that Sunday, the prison was in lockdown. One correctional officer found dead in his vehicle just outside the west perimeter, and Marcus's fiancée, nowhere to be found. Was this a simple act of violence, fueled by heartbreak? Or a piece of something far more organized, something carefully planned and expertly hidden? Was Marcus pushed past his limits, or was he just a pawn? Before you decide what to believe, ask yourself, if you were Marcus and the person you loved most betrayed you in the one place you thought was safe, what would you do? And how far would you go? So who was Marcus Del Rey? Marcus had served 11 years of a 15-year federal sentence for drug trafficking. He wasn't proud of how he ended up inside, but he took responsibility for it. The weight of that guilt was heavy, especially after his younger brother got caught up in the same world. That was Marcus's breaking point. He made a quiet decision. He'd serve his time, stay clean, and walk out of those gates with a plan. And for a while he stuck to it. His record inside was clean. So clean, in fact, that his custody status was lowered from G4 to G2. That reclassification earned him what few men inside ever get: trust. As a trustee inmate, Marcus was assigned to laundry detail for staff uniforms. He cleaned admin offices, ran errands between blocks. He even served meals to guards during overnight rotations. In return, he got little things: extended commissary, better meals, and most important of all, visitation rights. That's how he met her. Her name was Alana Brooks. She wasn't just another visitor. She was part of a prison ministry group that volunteered on Sundays. She'd come in wearing plain skirts, soft smiles, and carried this quiet kind of warmth that stood out in a place full of concrete and steel. It started with prayers and scripture, then notes, then letters. After 6 months of slow, steady connection, Alana registered as Marcus's official visitor. The chapel talks turned into weekly visits. They made plans. Marcus told her everything, about his childhood, about the mistakes that landed him inside, about the books he was reading, about the house he wanted to buy when he got out. And Alana? She told him she believed in him, that she would wait, that love was stronger than bars. For Marcus, that belief became his anchor, a reason to behave, a reason to become the man she saw in him. But about 4 months before that visitation room incident, something shifted. Marcus noticed it in the way she hugged him, too quick, too distracted. He noticed it in the way she stopped asking about his parole plans. In one late-night moment of frustration, he told his cellmate, "She's here, but she's not here." Then came something even stranger. A routine contraband sweep turned up a smuggled phone in a trash bin outside the visitation area. No prints, but it held 6 photos, blurry, angled, hard to make out. One showed a woman with Alana's exact hairstyle, in suggestive poses, seated on what looked like a guard's desk. Marcus never saw those images himself. But weeks later, when he heard officers whispering about the discovery, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something right in front of him. Then there was Officer Blake Weston, a 12-year veteran of the TDCJ system, clean record, steady hours, no write-ups, no complaints, but also no wife, no kids. And, according to rumors that circulated quietly among inmates and staff, he had favorites, mostly young female volunteers, new hires, ministry workers. Blake never said much, but he always seemed to be nearby when Alana visited. Sometimes he stood a little too close. Other times he offered to walk her to her car when visits ended late. Marcus noticed. He noticed everything. But what could he say? What could he prove? You don't accuse a guard in a Texas prison unless you've got more than a hunch. So Marcus did what many inmates do. He swallowed his suspicions. He waited. And then came that Sunday, that room, that moment behind the vending machine that cracked everything wide open, and once it did, there was no going back. On that Sunday, Marcus was approved for a Class 2 visit. These are considered non-contact, but for trustee status inmates like Marcus, who had a history of good behavior, they're less restricted. He was cleared to enter 10 minutes before official visiting hours began, a small exception given to inmates assigned to internal work detail. Normally, the escort officer would have walked him down, but Officer Blake Weston, his usual escort, was already inside. That alone should have raised a red flag. Security footage shows Marcus entering the visitation room alone at precisely 9:52 a.m. He pauses at the threshold. His body language shifts. Then he steps forward. But 18 seconds of that footage, between 9:53:12 and 9:53:30, suddenly went missing from the digital record. Corrupted file, no explanation. When investigators later reviewed the footage, they found nothing, just a hard cut between Marcus's entrance and a frozen moment of him standing still in the middle of the room. But Marcus would never forget what he saw during those missing seconds. Alana was straddling Officer Weston. Her visitor badge hung crookedly from her blouse, half unbuttoned, her skirt wrinkled, one shoe off. Weston didn't flinch. He didn't reach for his belt. He didn't even seem surprised. The two of them were deep in a moment that was never meant to be seen, and the vending machine, placed near a blind spot Marcus had always known about, was now the silent witness to everything. Marcus didn't yell. He didn't rush forward. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out. The guard at the next checkpoint asked if the visit was cut short. Marcus nodded once. No complaint, no eye contact, no emotion. He returned to his cell, silent, blank-faced. The officer marked him back in, checked off the time, and went back to his paperwork. But later that night, long after lights out, Marcus sat upright in his bunk. His cellmate would later recall how Marcus just stared at the ceiling for nearly an hour before reaching for a pencil stub he'd kept tucked inside his mattress. He didn't write anything. He didn't journal. He began to draw. What he drew was graphic, dark, violent. Figures were slashed through the center. One bore a crude resemblance to a correctional officer's uniform. Another had long hair tied in a bun, just like Alana wore during visitation. He shaded them heavily, smudged the pencil into the corners, over and over again. His hands moved mechanically without pause. By morning the drawing had vanished. Some believe he flushed it. Others say he tore it to pieces and stuffed it into a laundry sack during his shift. But what's clear is this: Marcus didn't tell anyone what he saw. He didn't file a complaint. He didn't request to block Alana from visiting, but something inside him had already snapped, and that quiet moment behind a vending machine was about to turn deadly. By Monday morning, 2 people were dead. Alana Brooks was discovered by hotel staff at 8:40 a.m. She'd checked into a roadside inn just 2 miles from the Polunsky unit the night before. When she didn't respond to housekeeping's second knock, a manager opened the door. She was found fully clothed, lying across the bed with bruising around her neck and petechial hemorrhaging in both eyes, classic signs of asphyxiation. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle. The visitor badge from Sunday's prison visit was still clipped to her blouse. Investigators pulled surveillance footage from the hallway. It showed her entering alone at 6:42 p.m. She never came back out. Hours later, back inside the unit, a different scene was unfolding. Correctional Officer Blake Weston missed 2 scheduled radio check-ins during the overnight shift. When a sergeant went searching for him around 2:30 a.m., he was found inside the supply room of Cell Block D, face down in a pool of blood, with multiple stab wounds to the chest and neck. The blood trail was short, confined to the room. There were no signs of forced entry, no panic alarm triggered. His utility belt was unfastened, and his radio? Switched off and tucked behind a stack of linen bundles. The immediate question on everyone's mind was obvious. How could Marcus Delray have done it? His movement log showed nothing irregular. He was counted in his bunk during lights out. He clocked in on laundry detail at 6 a.m., same as always. He never left the unit, no write-ups, no disciplinary flags. But then came a detail the prison couldn't ignore. A master key assigned to the laundry corridor had gone missing for nearly 12 hours. The key was quietly returned the next morning, slipped back into the lockbox during routine shift change. No fingerprints, no footage, just a silent reappearance. And then there was Weston himself. According to shift logs, he failed to report his movements between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. An internal review confirmed his radio had been deactivated. That alone was a major breach of protocol. But it didn't stop there. Inside Weston's locker, investigators found 2 contraband cell phones, one of which contained dozens of stored photos, some of them explicit. Multiple images featured Alana in compromising positions. Some appeared to have been taken in staff offices, others in what looked like Weston's own apartment. None were authorized, none should have existed. And deeper in the investigation, it was discovered that Alana's visitation logs were tampered with. Several of her visits extended longer than the allowed 2-hour limit. One visit, 3 weeks prior, wasn't logged at all. The officer on duty that day? Weston. As the evidence mounted, the theory of random violence began to collapse. Then came a statement from another inmate, a low-level offender housed just 2 tiers below Marcus. In exchange for protective custody, he claimed that Marcus approached him the night of the incident with a simple offer, 3 ramen packs in exchange for silence. The inmate said Marcus asked him to watch the tier during shift change. No questions, no interference. The implication was clear. Marcus had calculated his moves, because in prison information is currency, and silence can be deadly. Just when the prison thought the worst was behind them, the real story began to unfold. 13 days after the bodies were found, the warden received a plain manila envelope. No return address. Inside, a single piece of paper, handwritten in block letters. "You're looking at the wrong inmate. Ask the women on D shift." Everyone knew what Weston was doing. He was trading her for favors. That was it. No name. No details. But it was enough to trigger a mandatory inquiry from Internal Affairs. Within 48 hours, a female officer came forward, terrified, anonymous, but firm in her voice. She refused to give a recorded statement, but what she said off the record was enough to widen the investigation beyond anything the administration expected. Her words were chilling. Everyone knew what was happening. Blake Weston was pimping Alana out, to other guards, to trustees, promising her Marcus would get early release consideration if she just kept showing up and kept doing what he told her to. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't love. This was exploitation, calculated, systematic, and buried beneath layers of prison silence. As the story broke open, inmates began talking. Quietly at first, then steadily. 5 incarcerated men, each in separate units, requested protective custody and submitted matching testimonies. They described the same patterns, Alana arriving early, being escorted into staff offices not covered by surveillance, emerging looking disoriented or emotionally shaken. One inmate, doing janitorial detail near administrative housing, admitted seeing her sitting alone in the locker room, while Weston stood guard outside the door. Another described being paid 3 packs of ramen and 2 bottles of lotion to keep a hallway clear during one of her visits. What they all confirmed, Blake Weston was abusing his badge, and Alana Brooks, a woman who once arrived at the prison carrying a Bible and a belief in second chances, had become his leverage. She was promised that Marcus's name would be placed into a reevaluation file for early parole consideration, that she'd get longer visitations, that Marcus would be kept away from violent inmates, and in return, she had to give pieces of herself away, piece by piece, visit by visit, until she barely resembled the woman who first stepped into that visitation center. The most heartbreaking part? She didn't tell Marcus, because she believed if he knew, he would break. And she was probably right. When Marcus was finally brought in for a second round of questioning, investigators didn't need to push him. He looked tired. His eyes were red, not from anger, but exhaustion. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't even ask what they knew. He simply whispered, "I didn't kill her, but I let it happen. I knew what she was doing, and I was too afraid to lose her." For Marcus, the betrayal wasn't just what he saw in the visitation room. It was what he knew in his gut for months, but chose to ignore. He'd heard the rumors. He saw Weston's proximity. He sensed the way Alana's spirit seemed dimmer each time she came. But he clung to her anyway, not out of selfishness, but out of fear. After 11 years behind bars, she was his only thread to the outside world, and he'd rather hold on to a broken version of that thread than be left with nothing. When Alana's autopsy report came back, it added yet another layer to the already tangled web. There were no signs of struggle, no broken nails, no defensive bruising. She hadn't tried to fight her killer, which meant only one thing. She probably knew the person who ended her life, and maybe, in the final hours of her life, she'd finally had enough. Maybe she threatened to come forward, maybe she said no for the last time, or maybe, tragically, she just trusted the wrong person. One more time. Either way, Alana Brooks was gone, and Marcus Delray, though still breathing, would never truly be free again. In the end, the truth didn't come from a camera. It didn't come from a confession. It came from jealousy. Devon Roach was a name buried deep in Marcus's past. Not a friend, not an enemy, but a man who once sat across from him in the chapel, week after week, nodding quietly during sermons. Devon had been at the Polunsky unit for over a decade. Like Marcus, he kept his head down, maintained a record clean enough to earn trust status. But what few people knew was that Devon had also been receiving visits from Alana Brooks before she officially became Marcus's fiancée. Internal logs confirmed it. 2 years prior, when Alana was still new to the prison ministry program, she'd sat with Devon during private mentorship hours, read to him, prayed with him. According to Devon's own journal entries later submitted during his psych evaluation, he had developed feelings for her, deep ones, obsessive even. In one handwritten entry, he wrote, "She made the air feel different, like maybe God hadn't forgotten about me." But Alana had pulled away, abruptly. She stopped visiting him, stopped returning letters, and Devon blamed one man for that shift, Marcus Delray. He watched as Alana redirected her energy, her time, her affection towards someone else, someone quieter, someone she saw a future with. Then came the guard. In another entry, Devon wrote, "First he took her from me, then the guard took her from both of us." Weston's power, Marcus's love, Devon's desperation. It was a triangle fueled not just by lust or control, but by something far more dangerous, the fear of being forgotten. Security footage later revealed Devon near the supply closet on the night Weston was murdered. His work assignment had placed him on laundry transport during second shift. He had access, he had motive, and when investigators dug deeper, they found something chilling hidden in his belongings, a torn photograph of Alana. Folded and unfolded so many times, her face was cracked down the middle. Under pressure, Devon confessed. His words were quiet, matter-of-fact. "She chose the wrong men. I was the one who saw her. I was the only one who wouldn't have used her." Weston was dead. Alana was gone. And Marcus? Marcus was cleared of murder. But his sentence, his soul, and his sense of peace were left deeply wounded. He was moved into protective custody after a quiet attempt on his life by another inmate, a friend of Devon's who claimed Marcus didn't deserve to walk around free after what happened. Marcus didn't fight back. He didn't speak to the press. He never gave a statement in court. The only thing he ever asked for was to be left alone. The Texas Department of Criminal Justice launched an internal investigation into the Polunsky unit. 4 staff members were fired, including one sergeant who'd falsified visitation records. 2 more were disciplined for ignoring known blind spots on the security cameras. Officer Weston's official record, once spotless, was posthumously revised to reflect multiple policy violations and illegal conduct. His family never responded publicly. But what about Alana? There were no protests, no candlelight vigils, no courtroom packed with reporters. She was buried in a quiet ceremony, paid for by her church. A few volunteers attended. No family came forward. And her name faded from the headlines just as quickly as it had appeared. 1 woman, 2 inmates, 1 guard, a triangle built on control, sex, and betrayal, and beneath it all, a system that allowed her to fall through every crack. Alana didn't survive the system. Marcus did, but not without scars. So what really happened in that visitation room? Was it love, gone too far? Was it betrayal, masked as redemption? Or was it something more tragic? 2 people trapped in a system neither of them ever had full control over. A woman trying to hold on to hope in a place that punished her for caring, and a man who loved her so much, he convinced himself silence was safer than truth. Alana Brooks didn't just walk into that prison with a Bible and good intentions. She walked in with a heart full of belief that love could heal, that time could be forgiven, that maybe, just maybe, she could make a difference in someone's life before they ever left those prison walls. And Marcus Delray, he didn't just want freedom, he wanted meaning. He wanted to prove to himself, to the world, that the man he used to be wasn't the man he would always be. He wanted to build a future out of the rubble of his past. But inside a system built on control, fear, and silence, love doesn't always stand a chance. Now we're turning it over to you. If you made it this far, type "I'm still here" in the comments. Let us know you stayed. Let us know you heard every word. Because stories like these aren't just for entertainment. They're for reflection, for truth, for conversation. Do you think Marcus should have been held responsible for what happened, even if he didn't lay a hand on anyone? Was his silence part of the crime, or just the only protection he had left? Should prisoners be allowed to form romantic relationships with their visitors, or does that open a door for manipulation, for power imbalances, for heartbreak that doesn't end at the prison gates? These are uncomfortable questions. But sometimes the most uncomfortable ones are the ones that matter the most. And if you thought this story was dark, if you thought what happened between Marcus, Alana, and Weston was twisted, you haven't seen anything yet. Because in our next episode, we uncover the case of an inmate who married his correctional officer, only to vanish without a trace 2 days after the wedding. No note, no struggle, no explanation, just a wedding ring. And silence. Make sure you're here for that one. Subscribe now for more real stories from behind bars, stories of hope, stories of deception, stories of survival, and stories of lives forever changed by secrets. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in prison isn't the bars, it's what people are willing to do to feel human again.